have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Hi, everybody. It's Gay USA. I'm Ann Northrup.
And I'm Erin Jones.
Erin's having a little technical difficulty here.
I never do. I'm not that person.
No, but I like this emotion and passion and a whole new angle to the show, as if we don't have enough passion as it is. So anyway, Andy is away again this week and next week. We're hoping Marin will be able to have her technical difficulties worked out by next week. So what was I going to say at the top of the show? I don't know. So here are the headlines for this week. We're going to talk at the top about this radical right wing in Congress that keeps relentlessly trying to attach anti-LGBTQ plus laws to now every single bill that is proposed in Congress.
And we have increasingly emboldened violent, hateful attacks across the US against our community.
Really terrible. But there's good news, too. We have examples of people fighting back in California, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Washington State. And my favorite line of the week, no cupcakes for Nazis at a pride event in Spokane.
That's right. Our first male NFL coach has come out as gay.
In 2023. And then, strangely, the authorities have found more buried bodies of men related to a 30-year-old case of a serial killer in Indiana who died years ago.
That is so chilling. And also chilling over in Russia, Vladimir Putin has signed laws outlawing trans people.
And a straight man who the authorities say looked gay was arrested in Istanbul near the Pride March, not in it, and kept in jail for 3 weeks.
Oh, boy. We've got a little bit of good news on the AIDS front. We'll catch you up there.
Yep. And I did see the Barbie movie, not entirely voluntarily. But there's some real homoeroticism in it, which is not being discussed a lot. So you'll hear about that here. And, you know, Kevin Spacey got off on the sexual assault charges. We'll get to that eventually, but it's not our top headline. Mm-hmm. And I'm kicking myself because there was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember what it is. So it'll occur to me at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'll tell you then.
Well, I want to say I really loved last week's episode, doing the retrospective of Dike TV. It was just fantastic. And I really urge anybody who hasn't seen it to go back and watch that, because it was so refreshing and vindicating to see that so many of those issues in the mid-90s are still with us today.
Yes, and to see the comedy, the sarcasm, the creativity of the people who did that show 30 years ago. I left out the parts I did on that show because I can't bear to watch myself. But there's really a ton of terrific material. So if you go to gayusatv.org, you will find it on last week's show. Look for that. And thank you, Marin. I really enjoyed putting that together. It was a real labor of love. And as I've said repeatedly, there's this young video producer and editor who's been working with the Dike TV material for a couple of years now. And I worked with her, and she's the one who, you know, found segments and put them together. And it was just a joy and really a great summer treat, I thought. So
yeah, it was so interesting to see that the time period of Dike TV really ran parallel with that of Curve magazine at its heyday. And I think we are becoming, people of your age and my age, Anne, and we're becoming more aware that this was a real heyday. It was like a golden age for lesbians and queer women.
I felt that when I got into professional journalism in the early 70s, I had been watching, war correspondents in Vietnam and really eager to get into journalism, only to find when I got there that the golden age was over. That was disappointing. But here we are all these years later.
That's right.
All right. Well, to me, the thing we really need to tackle at the top is these totally out of control Republicans and the small number of right-wing, punitive radicals in the U.S. House who are controlling everything and who are now in a dedicated, relentless fashion attaching all these anti-LGBTQ plus proposals to funding bills for the U.S., starting with the defense bill. And that was shocking enough, but everybody said, oh, don't worry, it won't pass. And now they're doing it with every single bill, and it concerns me.
Absolutely. It's definitely strategic. I mean, a lot of these bills are essential. I mean, they're needed, like the Defense Authorization Act. It's considered really essential legislation. So that's a little bit disingenuous, isn't it, to attach riders to essential bills that have conservative agendas, I think.
Well, it's all political. It's all so they can try to satisfy their base that thinks it wants prohibitions on trans kids getting medical care or, using the correct bathroom for their gender identity or just any education on LGBTQ people or issues. All of that is being attached to these bills. And then we're told, well, don't worry, it won't pass the Senate and it'll all disappear in conference committees. And I think to myself, really, are the Democrats really going to stand up for us all the way? Or is there going to be some kind of compromise where they agree to some of it to get an essential bill passed? And meanwhile, we're sold down the river. I am not comfortable with this. And I'm certainly not comfortable with Kevin McCarthy and all the more moderate Republicans going along with these things in the House. Why, Kevin McCarthy should be grabbing a couple dozen moderate Democrats in the House and getting them to vote with him to defeat these proposals and do compromise bills the way Congress used to work. But they won't do that. They won't do that. So 20 right-wingers are controlling this whole process, and it is driving me nuts. So we really got to get rid of those, the extremists. And I would argue there are not extremists on the left, but there are certainly plenty of them on the right, and they're evil and nasty and dangerous. And we have to take back the House to stop this process.
Absolutely.
Maren is nodding in agreement. I appreciate that.
I'm nodding in agreement because, the thing is, once these laws get through in that form, we're living with them for a very long time. So it's better to not try to shut the gate after the horse has bolted, as we say.
Exactly. But there are all these, twists and turns of how they're doing it. And they're doing it so they can win more seats next year. And that's a really depressing prospect. So let's, from that sort of big picture horror story, let's get into the long list of ways that right-wing attacks are actually playing out in the states and with individual people. And let's start with this judge in Texas, this Diane Hensley. She became notorious a while ago because she, like others in her position, refused to perform same-sex marriages, and she got rebuked for that. And then a couple of years went by and everything calmed down. But now with the Supreme Court and this website decision and, websites for same-sex couples, she's standing up again and saying, well, this now supports me. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. And discrimination laws don't matter. And I don't have to marry same-sex couples if I don't want to. And this is just a harbinger of everything to come.
Yeah. And of course, hiding under religious faith again. She's long claimed that the governmental body violated state law by punishing her for actions taken in accordance with her religious faith. I don't know. I mean, she's seeking damages of $10,000, which isn't a lot, obviously, so it's a symbolic gesture. But,
yeah, but the symbolism is bad.
It is bad, and she's emboldened, of course, by the 303 Creative LLC versus Alenis case, which we know is the website, the internet website company who declined to apparently, allegedly do a job for a gay man who, of course, turns out not to exist. So this is all very complicated.
Well, we have to sort out where religious freedom has to respect secular life and equal protection of the laws. And we have not yet done that. And we have swung to the side of religion trumps everything. And our problem is that that's what people are able to interpret from the Constitution. And we got to rethink that.
Yeah. And we've got to sort out the difference between free speech and hate speech. That's
Yes.
the other one.
Well, and that's a tough one, but all of this is dicey. Well, meanwhile, thank you to out lesbian Representative Becca Ballant from Vermont, who is proposing a censure of Marjorie Taylor Greene, her colleague in the U.S. House, for her hate speech, for promoting violence, and for promoting conspiracy theories. DeSantis in Florida was in the middle of his campaign for president, which is sinking like a rock, thank heavens, has said that he would throw all trans people out of the military. But he's fighting the local authorities in Florida. The latest is a judge who will not reinstate DeSantis's ban on drag performances. The legislature passed it, but the courts have overruled it, and they went back to a judge, and he said, forget it. It's free speech. So that's good. All right. In Geneva College in Pennsylvania, a Christian college, I always put quote marks around that, has fired its soccer coach, Kelsey Morrison, because she is an out lesbian. She put up some Instagram posts that said the church needs LGBTQ people for, enrichment and creativity. And she'd been out as a coach at the college, but no more because she's out as a coach. They have fired her with no warning.
I found this really troubling because, first of all, her Instagram account was set to private. So it's a private account. Not anyone can look at it. Second of all, she told the school that she was gay, but that she was celibate. So, and that
you've frozen for a second. So, yes, she did tell the school she was celibate, and yet they have fired her. Not that I think anyone should have to be celibate, but that's evidently their standard at this Christian college.
Yeah.
Better news from Waukesha, Wisconsin, where you may remember a few months ago when a teacher objected to the fact that the spring play included a Dolly Parton, Miley Cyrus song, Rainbow Land, because evidently rainbows are now banned also. Well, she was suspended when she made that objection. Now she has been fired because they say she is insubordinate. She is going to sue, saying that her First Amendment rights to free speech have been violated.
I think that's the way to go, for sure.
Yeah. Well, this is what happens. And we have an update on the Traverse City, Michigan hairdresser who said she would not serve trans customers. She's gotten a lot of, you should excuse the expression, blowback. Hairdresser, blowback, whatever. for her attitude. And a company that makes hair products says they will refuse to do business with her. The city, Traverse City, Michigan, it turns out, has a non-discrimination law, which includes gender identity and expression. And the mayor came out and said he's very pro-LGBTQ and complained about her. So she's not getting a lot of support for her attitude.
I'm again confused about why she thinks, it feels to me like she's misinterpreted a situation, why she thinks that her hairdressing services are actually free speech rather than a business service. You know?
Well, again, it's this website decision from the Supreme Court. These are the little seeds that have been planted, and now anybody who doesn't like us thinks they have permission to have nothing to do with us. And that's not even counting the people who really, literally want us wiped off the face of the earth. But she and others just interpret that decision as, okay, I don't have to serve these people, as the website creator does not have to serve same-sex couples. And since the Supreme Court called that free speech rather than religious freedom, she's leaning on that. All right. Good news. In California, the legislature passed a constitutional amendment to repeal Prop 8, which was the anti-same-sex marriage law from some years ago, but which is still on the books, as those laws are still on the books in a lot of states. This will now have to go before the voters next year to formally enshrine same-sex marriage rights in the Constitution of California, but that's moving ahead.
Are we staying in California to talk about Gavin Newsom?
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so after vowing to defy the pressure from the governor of this state, Temecula Valley Unified School Board reversed this decision and has in fact adopted the social studies textbooks in elementary grades that were under review. Otherwise, they were going to get hit with a big fine, right? $1.6 million and another fine, I think it's $1.5 million if they did not include the books. I think Gavin Newsom did acknowledge the change of mind from the board, and he said, fortunately, now students will receive the basic materials needed to learn. But this vote lays bare the true motives of those who oppose the curriculum. It has never been about parents' rights. It's not even about Harvey Milk, which, by the way, these people just called a pedophile.
He may have had a relationship with a younger man years and years before, but that's not even clear. And they've jumped on that to call him a pedophile.
Of course they jumped on that, but Harvey Milk's not even in the textbooks under question, which is typical. So Newsom said this is about extremists' desire to control information and censor the materials used to teach our children.
They literally want to erase us. So whether it's curriculum or anything else, pride things, rainbows, they just want us gone. They have had it. They've had enough. They want us gone. But in DeKalb County, Georgia, they have passed a sexual orientation and gender identity and expression non-discrimination law. This was a long, painful campaign, particularly in the town of Tucker in DeKalb County, but they have triumphed, and that's excellent news. Now, back to some of the bad attacks around the country. In Kentucky, Beechmont, Kentucky, there's an open-air market, a farmer's market that takes place regularly in the just outside the Baptist church there in the parking lot or whatever. And the market has been run for the last 3 years by a trans woman, Nedra McNeil. All very peaceful, all fine, no problems. But suddenly the Baptist church has decided they do not want Nedra running the market, and they have forced her out and said they don't want someone in women's clothing running the market. That's their excuse. Nedra wears overalls and a polo shirt or T-shirt underneath. It's ridiculous.
It's disturbing.
Yeah. There are instances of people fighting back. You know, all these laws are being passed around the country to forbid trans youth from getting medical care, and it's expanding into adult trans people not being able to access medical care. So now legal organizations, families, medical professionals are banding together. And the latest is that in Texas, in Tennessee, and in Florida, lawsuits have been filed to stop those laws from going into effect. Again, these end up being equal protection lawsuits often, because imagine telling a group of people, you can't have medical care. Everyone else can have medical care, but you can't have medical care because we don't like the medical care you're getting.
Right. And I mean, especially what I like about it is it's putting faces and cases to the community. In Florida, I think they added 4 different plaintiffs to the case because these people are right in the middle of their healthcare. They're right in the middle of receiving transgender care, that if it's interrupted or stopped, it'll have a terrible effect on their lives.
Exactly. They're being forced to detransition or move to a state where they can get care. It's horrible. And there's a new report out from the Anti-Violence Project in New York, the 2022 LGBTQ plus Safe Spaces National Needs Assessment. They talked to 380 businesses across the country and found relentless violent attacks on business after business after business across the country. If you want to take a look at that report, you can go to protectsafespaces.org and read about the horror stories from all over the country. And in the Northwest, neo-Nazis with hoods often are showing up at pride events all over the Northwest to try to attack. One was an event called Pride in Perry, Perry being the gay neighborhood in Spokane. They were carrying signs saying, "Protect white children." And their idea is to be as provocative as possible and to provoke fighting and chaos and violence. Luckily, the Pride people in Perry and the Spokane area did not take the bait. They remained calm and peaceful and simply told the Nazis to go away. And they were handing out cupcakes. And when the Nazis asked for cupcakes, the Pride organizer said, "No cupcakes for Nazis."
I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? It's disruptive, but it's interesting to connect this with the case in Idaho. Those 4 white supremacists who were trying to disrupt that pride, the law in Idaho considered that rioting. So those guys have gotten hit with a sentence.
Yes, there in fact was a
five white nationalists.
Yes, of a group of 31 who were all, I remember they were in vans. They were all headed for the pride in Idaho. They were Patriot Front guys, some of whom had attacked the Capitol on January 6th. But they got stopped before they got to the Pride event and arrested. So 5 have now been convicted. Yes. And I think they're going after the rest of them. I think we're going to hear more on this.
Yep.
Meanwhile, I'm racing through this a little because with the Dike TV show last week, we're actually catching up on 2 weeks of news. So there we go. In Plano, Texas, a hate group firebombed a church there, the Community Unitarian Universalist Church, which, as you see, flies a pride flag. Luckily, damage was done only to the front doors of the church, and it was done around midnight, so there weren't people there. But they weren't kidding around. They unleashed firebombs there. And in Winter Haven, Florida, a pregnant trans man, Camden Ryder, 21 years old, yes, trans men do get pregnant if they go off their testosterone for a while. Shot dead by his partner, Riley Groover, 26, who then committed suicide. And Camden was 8 months pregnant, and the child did not survive that shooting. So Camden and the baby murdered.
Horrible story. Apparently, the couple lived with, I believe it was Groover's mother, who said that there had been a history of arguments, some turned physical, over basically domestic chores. And Riley Groover did have a history of lashing out and being violent. So very, very sad domestic violence, intimate partner violence situation there.
Terrible. And there was also this strange story out of, where is it? Pontiac. No, that's another one. But let's tell that. In Pontiac, Michigan, a trans man with MS, multiple sclerosis, in a wheelchair was shot with a pellet gun in a drive-by shooting by someone who then yelled slurs at him as they drove by.
Yeah. That's terrible. Andrew Blake Newton, 30 years of age, he was just wheeling out at around midnight to get a snack, midnight munchies, and look what happens. That's terrible. He did report injuries, leaking fluid, having to go right to the hospital, and he says it absolutely was a hate crime.
Yeah, I'm looking for the story of in California, in LA. Trans guy driving along on the road. A cop starts following him, follows him into a parking lot of some business, and gets out and grabs him and starts beating the hell out of him. Eventually arrests him. Claims it was because he had an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror, which is sometimes illegal as a potential interference with vision, but never said anything to the guy. The guy's saying, "What are you doing? Get your hands off me. What did I do? Why are you doing this?" And the cop just keeps beating him and beating him and beating him.
Did you see the video? It is very disturbing. It happens in an almost deserted parking lot in a 7-Eleven in the middle of the day, by the way. And you can hear the music blaring, as often they do in those stores. They blare the music. No one is coming to this man's aid. He's lying face down on the tarmac, screaming, saying, "I'm giving you my hand. You've got my hand," basically saying, "I'm giving it up." And this guy, the sheriff, is just beating him. And then in the lockup, he was asked to show his genitals to prove his gender so that they knew which jail cell to put him in.
No word on which one they ended up putting him in.
Right.
Then in a really, really strange and horrible story, in Indiana, 30 years ago, there was a serial killer, Herbert Braunstein, who was Baumeister, Herbert Baumeister, a rich Republican donor. He was found to have been a serial murderer of gay men and boys in the 80s and 90s. And they found some bodies buried that he had killed. And then he committed suicide in 1996. Well, now the cops have dug up 10,000 more bones and body parts in his yard. And they are thinking there are hundreds more victims. And they're in the process of IDing more of these victims. Between this, we're watching on HBO the Last Call series of the serial murder of gay men, where Andy is featured a lot as having covered the case. And the Gilgo Beach in New York, the guy who murdered the sex workers and buried them all at the beach. It's men are doing this. Not all men, of course.
Not all men, but men. You do wonder about this archetype of the predator. What causes it, and I'm very thankful for the advances in DNA technology, because, of course, none of these crimes can be solved without this technology.
Exactly. All of this is a list of horrible things that are being perpetrated. But a few pieces of good news. One more bad before I get to the good stuff. In Eau Claire, Wisconsin, a right-wing law firm is suing a school district because a trans teacher came out at school to students. And the law firm says that the parents were not adequately warned ahead of time, as if, what were the parents supposed to do? Keep their kids away from learning that this teacher was trans? How were they going to handle that? So that is ugly. All right. But in New York City, the city council has passed bills requiring the Department of Corrections to report on what's happening with trans prisoners in the local jails. And another bill refuses cooperation with other states that are banning trans youth care. So this remains a haven for trans youth. In Jacksonville, Florida, wait, do we want to get to that yet?
I think you want to visit our gorilla. I think you want to visit our gorilla in the zoo.
Okay. Columbus, Ohio has a very famous zoo, and a gorilla has just given birth. They have a lot of gorilla births in Columbus. The problem is that people thought the gorilla was male, and they were quite surprised when the gorilla gave birth. I find this all quite amusing and ironic at a time when the right wing wants to tell us that they know exactly who is female and who is male, and that there's nothing in between, and they have all the answers, and how dare we muddy up anything. And there's the gorilla who says, I don't care what you think I am, here's my baby.
Yeah, and look, Sully, the thing is, gorillas don't, their gender isn't quite apparent until they turn about 8. And Sully was 8 when she gave birth. But the staff at the zoo were a little bit clueless because they had a hands-off approach to the gorillas. They wanted the gorillas to take care of each other. Sully's mother had been raising her up until that point. And that's another little kick for the Republicans. How about you don't interfere in people's sexualities and their reproduction? Wouldn't that be a good idea?
What an idea. You're such a radical, Marin. I can hardly stand it. All right. In Jacksonville, Florida, we have our first out gay male NFL football coach, not a head coach. Kevin Maxon is an assistant Jacksonville Jaguars strength and conditioning coach. He's on the right. His boyfriend's on the left. He's the first NFL male coach to come out. There have been lesbians who have worked for NFL teams, and we have talked about them and showed them over the last few years. He came out because he wasn't comfortable hiding his partner, Nick.
Yep.
So there he was with Nick, and that was great. And also coming out, actually about a month ago, but we're just catching up with this, the voice of the New York City subway system, Bernie Wagenblast, it turns out, is now a trans woman. We have a little local news piece on this.
I love this story.
There is a downtown express 5 train to Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn College.
It's the famous voice you hear if you've ever stepped foot on a New York City subway. Behind that voice is Bernie Wagenblast, a 60-year-old transportation and radio journalist.
My dead name was Bernard, which was the name that I was born with and pretty much only used in legal documents and things of that sort. I legally changed my name to Bernie a couple of years ago. These days, I consider it short for Bernadette.
Bernie is now proudly showcasing a new voice.
5 months ago today, I transitioned to living my life full-time as a woman.
Bernie says it's been a lifelong dream.
There was not an hour of my waking life, probably from when I was a little kid to when I socially transitioned, that I didn't think about this, at least in passing. Every hour, it was constantly there.
There is a downtown express 4.
So what about the voice of the subway? Well, that will remain a staple of New York City culture.
I take pride in what I've accomplished with that guy voice, that I'm not going to deny that. I still use that voice for professional purposes.
More recently, Bernie is lending her voice to the AirTran at Newark Liberty International Airport and the Petco speed line around Philadelphia.
Aer Lingus, Air France, Air India.
I just love that story. Hey, do you think Bernie also does the stand clear of the closing doors? You know that?
Yes, of course.
That's Bernie?
Bernie does all that.
Oh my
voice.
God.
You heard it at the top of the piece.
I
It's all
love
Bernie.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, that's the highlight of my show today. I just think that's a great story.
Okay. Well, I got a couple of other little highlights. In Washington State, the right wing has failed to get enough signatures for a public referendum to repeal trans rights in the state. They could not do it. Trans rights remain in place in Washington State. And in Arizona, a judge has issued a temporary injunction against a law that the legislature passed, barring trans girls in school sports. So the judge has stopped that. And, the 3 trans girls in Arizona, I'm making up that number, who want to participate in school sports can do so. And before we get to international news, a couple of people, major people in the community we lost this week. In Berkeley, California, Dr. Sherry Pies, 73 years old, a professor of public health at Berkeley. She wrote a book called Considering Parenthood, a workbook for lesbians, published in 1985. And while that seems kind of late to me, it actually was revolutionary at the time.
Absolutely. That was the Gaby boom, as we called it, the Gaby boom. She did all of the proper medical research and helped so many women have families.
Well, at that time, I was already a stepmother of some years to my 2 stepsons in my first big relationship. So it doesn't seem, so I know that lesbians have been parents forever in one way or another. But yes, this was a lot about the medical possibilities of actually giving birth. She died of cancer. She leaves her wife, Melina Linder. She ran workshops in her house in the early 80s to teach women how to get hip to birthing issues. And then dying in Florida, Jonathan Lewis at age 64 of lymphoma. He was the affluent son of the longtime insurance executive, Peter Lewis, and he used his money for LGBTQ activism. He was gay, and he was an activist and a philanthropist, and he put together a conference some years ago of activists to talk about how to strategize and organize. I was at that conference, and a lot came out of that, including the whole movement against Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we formed a group called Get Equal, who chained themselves to the White House fence. He was very, very progressive and forward-thinking, and he worked also against Prop 8 in California and poured a lot of his ample resources into these fights. And he was a very, very nice guy, and dying at 64, much too young.
Too young. And there's lots of evidence to suggest that he really did move the needle on those 2 causes.
He really did, which shows you what dedication and money put together can do. So Jonathan Lewis, sorry to see that. All right, let us now whip through some international news.
What's happening in Russia? This is really terrible news, I think. It's quite chilling. Vladimir Putin has signed legislation that actually effectively bans transgender people, bans people from changing their gender, bans them from, their marriage. If they got married when they were in an opposite sex relationship, the marriage has to be annulled. This is quite radical, and it was actually passed unanimously by both houses of parliament. The only way the only way gender is allowed to be changed is if it is medically supervised as part of a necessary intervention.
Yeah, like maybe intersex people.
Yeah.
No document changes are allowed for changing your gender marker. no adopting children. It's just, it literally is an erasure movement. It is, we're getting rid of these people. We don't acknowledge them. And this is evidently how Putin thinks he's going to divert attention from his losing war.
Yes.
And maintain some kind of support.
Yes.
In Uganda, the African Human Rights Coalition has put out a report on what's been happening in the months since the Kill the Gays bill was passed, and they have observed escalating attacks, hunting down LGBTQ people, arresting people. People are desperate to get out of Uganda. But the doors are shutting all over. Ghana is now threatening to pass an identical bill. Their parliament is working on it. The UN has stated that what's happening now in Ghana is state-sponsored discrimination and violence. And people went to court to try to challenge this potential law and failed. The court rejected them. So it looks like Ghana is going to be the next place that passes one of these horrible, horrible, horrible homicidal bills.
The bill is chilling. It's called the Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Family Values Bill. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah. And the president of Iran has just visited Uganda, saying to coalesce with them on this kind of program. The Iranian president says homosexuality will end the generation of human beings. These people who are, we do all these stories about gay people giving birth, adopting children, whatever, having surrogates. And yet these criminals get up and lie and say that homosexuality is A, about making everyone gay, and B, about wiping out any future generations.
Well, speaking of that, what about what's happening in Italy with in the northern city of Padua? Authorities have started removing the names of non-biological gay mothers from their children's birth certificates. Talk about erasure. This is under new legislation passed by the traditional Family First government of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. As we know, she was going to be trouble. And already, I think it's the birth certificates belonging to 33 children who underwent artificial insemination. These have already been erased.
Yes, and we know what a nightmare Hungary is with Viktor Orban, and he is continuing to attack us and cracking down more against us with these no promo homo laws. But Budapest saw a huge pride march with thousands and thousands of people in the street. Look at that. That is a beautiful, beautiful sight. And the U.S. ambassador to Hungary, it turns out, is gay and has a partner and has 2 kids. And he held a reception celebrating LGBTQ plus family pride. So there's a lot going on in Hungary, but Orban is still running wild there.
Yes, at least 10,000 people turned up to that parade. So that's not a bad effort at all.
No, it's terrific and beautiful, as you see. Malaysia is continuing its nonsense. They confiscated rainbow-colored Swatch watches. There is a real crackdown. And Swatch is suing and said that our watches did not and can't cause any disruption to public disorder.
My goodness, inanimate plastic objects, yes.
or any violations of the law. I meant to wear my Swatch watch. It's over there. I'm not going to get up and get it, but I do wear a Swatch watch. It's quite colorful. But meanwhile, the band, the 1975, was performing in Malaysia, and their lead singer, perhaps a little tipsy, gave a scathing, expletive-laden speech against the Malaysian government for all this, and then kissed one of his band members to complain. Well, the government canceled future concerts, the whole festival they were part of.
The Good Vibes Festival.
Yeah. But now there's this huge controversy over whether this was white savior syndrome of this guy making this speech and doing this. is this helpful to locals or not? And to me, this is just the ongoing argument. We have the same arguments over boycotting South Africa for apartheid, over boycotting Florida now for its stuff. And there's both sides are right. It's yes, it puts local people in jeopardy, but it also raises these issues internationally and is important. And you have to fight inside and outside. So
yeah, I mean, I've got so many mixed feelings about this. One, Matty Healy's not gay; he's just an ally, and he has a terrible history with women. But I also do believe in when in Rome. I feel like if you're going to a Muslim majority country where there's 400 million Muslims, it's kind of like you can get on a plane and leave after you've caused trouble. So these things are very complicated.
They are, and I acknowledge all that and think that's completely valid. I also. He may not be the best messenger, but I think it's important to raise these issues. In the UK, in London, they're talking about maybe putting up a statue of Alan Turing in Trafalgar Square. This is after the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak apologized for all the past, for the ban that on military service by LGBTQ, and they have a new MP in London, the youngest MP, who is known as the baby, the out gay Labour MP Keir Mather, 25 years old, and he's famous for 5 years ago confronting the Russian ambassador over the torture and murders of gay people in Chechnya.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive. Yes, I think he's also vowing to help clean up the mess that he knows the Conservatives will inevitably make. So he sounds like a really, genuine firebrand politician.
Absolutely. And my vote for Weird Story of the Week is we've been talking about the violence and bans of the Istanbul Pride parades over the last few years, which have been really ugly. Well, it turns out some tourist was walking the streets near the Pride parade, a straight guy, had no idea the Pride parade was even on or anything that was happening. And suddenly he's picked up and arrested by the cops. Why? Because he looked gay, according to them. He had no idea what was going on. And what did they do with him? They held him for 20 days in jail in Istanbul.
Unbelievable.
Yes, exactly. So if you out there think you're immune from any of this, think again.
That's
it can
right.
happen to anybody, anytime.
That's right. A little bit disappointing to see what's happening in Israel. Israel declined to join a US-led move to criticize legislation against the LGBT community in Hungary. We should have mentioned that with the Hungary story. But it's disappointing because I guess we always thought Israel was an ally, didn't we?
Yes, we did. I'm just getting a bulletin that Sinead O'Connor has died.
Going to mention that. Breaking news. She has died at the age of 56. Of course, it's unknown at this point.
Well, I was a fan. Nothing compares to you. Her version of that, stunning.
Yeah.
More on that when we get more. In Poland, there is a human rights ombudsman who says he is going to go on a campaign to challenge the LGBT-free zones that the government has set up over the last few years. We'll see how that works out. The International Cycling Federation has now banned trans cyclists, trans female cyclists, after a trans female competed in a female race and won, more as a publicity stunt. I think it was strange. And they're barring trans women who transitioned after male puberty. So earlier transition may get around that. And the World Aquatics Federation has added an open category for non-binary and trans competitors, or I guess anyone else who wants to compete in that category. So that at least, we can debate whether that's the right solution, but it's an attempt. And Jamaica and the U.S. are in a fight because Jamaica wouldn't accept the spouse of a gay diplomat from the U.S. So the U.S. is barring some Jamaica diplomats. There's a standoff at the moment. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left, and I think if you're ready, we should move on to the AIDS news because there's...
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay. Well, the International AIDS Society is having its conference this week. So there's a lot of news coming out around HIV and AIDS. The Lancet has published a review of studies that there's almost, I always am wary of that word, almost no risk of HIV transmission from one partner to the other, even if a little virus is evident. So they're saying you don't have to stick to completely undetectable to feel safe. You can have a very low level of HIV showing up in testing and still be safe. Now, almost and little, these are dangerous words, but they're quite sure that this is a better situation. And that it means you can use simpler testing that doesn't have to be quite so discerning. Although they say mother to child transmission still has to be treated more carefully.
And what about the HIV positive cop in Tennessee? Former Memphis police officer of the year has filed a discrimination lawsuit against the Nashville Police Department, claiming it violated federal law by rescinding his job after learning that he has HIV. But this gentleman's HIV status is basically undetectable. So he's already been cleared by his doctor because undetectable means untransmissible. So it's not relevant. But the cop shop is saying that basically they were going by their concept of what physically fit to serve means.
It's more erasure.
Of course.
And the Nashville police say that this guy would have been a danger to the public. And you don't have to be undetectable to have a job.
Right.
Medication would be nice. You want to be healthy, but to rescind a job offer because someone has HIV is just insane and illegal and unconstitutional. A new trial called the Reprieve trial has found that there is a drastically lower risk of heart disease for HIV positive people if they are taking statins. And particularly this one statin, pitavastatin or pitavastatin, because it has anti-inflammatory properties, which is important for people with HIV, and does not interact badly with antiretrovirals. So their heart disease is a real problem for people with HIV on these meds that increase their risk. So to find that statins can, and one in particular, can lower that risk is a great piece of news. And also interesting is that the CDC is considering recommending doxycycline, an antibiotic, as a morning after pill for STDs. That rather than wait until you get an STD to start taking antibiotics, that you can take it after risky sex that risks transmitting STDs, and that maybe that means you don't have to use condoms. Again, this kind of stuff makes me a little nervous. But for those who don't use condoms and who have had an STD in the last year, they're saying consider taking doxycycline as a preventative. Although they haven't proved yet that it works in women. And there are, of course, the same concerns you have with any antibiotic, which is creating resistance to the antibiotic. So you don't want to be on it forever, every day, all the time. And I'm mad at the New York Times because they have just discovered that Gilead was profiteering off its PrEP drug. We've gone through 2 lawsuits about this and you didn't pay attention. It's annoying. We lost those lawsuits. But now everybody says, oh, Gilead was profiteering. Okay. And there's possibly a 6th person cured of HIV with a stem cell transplant. But they're still saying you can't do that unless you have fatal cancer, and then they'll give you a stem cell transplant, and maybe you'll get rid of your HIV. All right, we're down to 5 minutes in entertainment news.
You have to tell us about Barbie. Barbie has broken several box office records, including 4, to put a feminist spin on it, the biggest box office for any female director ever, I believe. So I haven't seen it yet because I'm still traumatized by that little tiny footage doll. And so I haven't gone yet. And I'm also allergic to hype. So I'm going to go when the hype dies down. But Anne, you've seen it. So
this goes in the Hype Hall of Fame. There has never been a movie better promoted than Barbie. I went reluctantly. I don't want to, what's the phrase of, I don't want to be a wet blanket on this. I did not particularly enjoy it. I thought it was very superficial, but there is a strong propaganda, feminist twist to all of this. I just thought, weren't they around in the feminist days? None of this is particularly new, but maybe you have to reteach it for every generation. There are some cute moments. There are some clever moments. I enjoyed those. But really what you might want to know about is that Ken, it's a very gay storyline with Ken. And these are all his bros. And it's just homoeroticism run wild with Ken. It's confusing kind of the way they handle it, but it's definitely there. And I understand why the right wing is sort of up in arms about this whole thing. But I'm also enjoying the fact that people are telling them to calm down. It's the kind of movie where I didn't enjoy it so much, but I'm thinking, well, maybe if I saw it again, I would enjoy it more.
But it's not Citizen Kane. Come on. If you didn't get it first time round, it's not.
Well, you see it and tell me. That's your assignment in the next week. See Barbie, and we'll revisit this.
Big congrats to Kristen Kish, who's going to be taking Padma Lakshi's place on Top Chef Bravo. We're so happy. She's terrific. I mean, what a wonderful success story. Adopted, grows up in the Midwest, comes out as a lesbian and marries an Aussie. I love it.
And won season 10 as Top Chef as a contestant, has been sort of guesting as a judge since then. And now will take over Padma's place as co-host for season 21. She also had her own Disney series, Restaurants at the End of the World. Kristen Kish is a real star, and I really like her. And the other big movie of the week was Oppenheimer. I haven't seen that, but there's this ancillary story that revealed that the FBI was pursuing lesbians who were working on the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos and Hanford, and so that has come along as I don't think it's in the movie, but it is part of the story. So, Maren, we have reached the end of our this week. We'll have less to cover next week because we're only doing 1 week. But we will see you then on Gay USA.
Absolutely, and I'll do my preview of the Women's World Cup next show.
That's right, because you're going to Australia to cover the last week of it. Lucky you. All right. Thank you for watching. Sorry this was a little mechanically off, but I think we got all the news out. See you next week.
Bye.